The steel bridge stretched like a skeleton across the black water, silent except for the steady thud of boots. The Navy SEAL team moved in disciplined rhythm, every step measured, every glance calculated. The night was humid, heavy with tension, as if the air itself knew danger was waiting. They carried only the essentials: rifles, ammunition, and the unspoken trust that each man's survival depended on the others. The commander, Lieutenant Harris, raised his fist, signaling a halt. The team dropped low, eyes scanning the shadows. The bridge was long and exposed, a deadly funnel with no cover if things went wrong. Harris had a bad feeling, the kind of gnawing instinct honed by years of combat. He studied the darkness beyond the opposite bank. Something was off. Too quiet. The mission was clear: cross the bridge, breach the compound on the far side, and rescue hostages before they were executed at dawn. Intelligence suggested moderate resistance. Yet as the men advanced, the silence screamed louder than gunfire. "Keep sharp," Harris whispered into his radio. His voice was calm, but his jaw tightened. They moved forward. Boots clanged softly on the grating beneath them. Then, without warning, the night exploded. A barrage of tracer rounds sliced across the bridge, painting red streaks in the air. The sound was deafening rifle bursts, machine guns roaring, steel sparking under impact. Harris dove behind a concrete divider, his men scrambling for cover wherever they could find it. One soldier cursed as rounds chewed through the railing inches from his head. The bridge had become a death trap in seconds. Contact left. Contact front. A voice shouted over the radio. The enemy had been waiting. They were dug in at both ends of the bridge, hidden in elevated positions, their fire perfectly coordinated. The SEALs were pinned, boxed in with no retreat. Sparks showered as bullets struck metal, and smoke began to fill the air. "Return fire," Harris barked. His men obeyed instantly, unleashing controlled bursts toward muzzle flashes in the distance. The bridge shook with chaos gunfire, shouts, the smell of cordite mixing with river mist. But the math was grim. The SEALs were outnumbered, and the enemy had superior positioning. For every round they fired, 3 came back. Ammunition dwindled faster than Harris liked. "Status?" Harris called. "Low on mags," one man responded. "2 left." "Same here," another added. The commander's stomach sank. They'd barely begun, and already their resources bled away. A rocket-propelled grenade whooshed overhead, slamming into the railing behind them. The blast sent shrapnel flying, rattling teeth and knocking one SEAL to the ground. He groaned, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Another dragged him back, applying pressure. Morale wavered. They were elite warriors, trained for impossible missions. But even the best could recognize when the odds stacked to crushing levels. Harris saw it in their eyes, the flicker of doubt, the whisper of defeat. Pinned on the bridge, surrounded by darkness, it felt like a grave waiting to close. "Hold your ground," Harris shouted, forcing strength into his tone. "We are not done here." But privately, he wondered if they were. Minutes passed like hours. The enemy's fire never relented, pushing them deeper into cover. They couldn't advance, couldn't retreat. The bridge had turned into a coffin suspended above the river. One SEAL muttered under his breath, "It's over." The words cut through Harris like a blade. He wanted to argue, but part of him feared it might be true. Above the chaos, unseen by any of them, a lone figure lay prone on a distant ridge. She had crawled into position hours earlier, dragging her rifle and scope through the dirt, patient as stone. Her world narrowed to crosshairs and heartbeat. From her vantage point, she had watched the SEALs march onto the bridge. She had seen the ambush unfold, and she knew that without intervention, The team would never make it across. Through her scope, she could see everything: the muzzle flashes, the shifting shadows, the squad trapped like prey. Her breathing slowed, steadying her hands. Years of training had prepared her for this moment. Each calculation: wind, distance, humidity, registered in silence. She watched Harris duck behind cover, shouting into his radio, his men firing blindly into the night. She saw the militants advance, tightening the noose. Her finger rested on the trigger. Patience. Timing was everything. On the bridge, Harris leaned against the barrier, sweat dripping down his temple. His men looked to him for direction, but every option felt like suicide. Retreat meant running into waiting guns. Staying meant death by attrition. Advancing was unthinkable. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, weighing choices no leader should face. Then crack. The sound was sharp, cutting through the roar of battle. One hostile jerked violently, collapsing in mid-stride. His weapon clattered to the steel, echoing across the bridge. The SEALs froze, stunned. Crack. Another fell. A clean headshot that left the rest scrambling in confusion. "What the?" One SEAL muttered. Harris peeked over cover, eyes scanning the battlefield. Someone was out there, unseen, delivering salvation with deadly precision. Hope flickered, fragile but real. The enemy hesitated, their confidence shaken. They hadn't expected resistance from above. Panic rippled through their lines as another militant dropped. The SEALs exchanged glances, whispers rising. "Sniper. We've got a sniper on our side." Harris clenched his jaw, forcing his voice steady. "Whoever it is, use it. Push forward." They leaned out, firing controlled bursts, emboldened by the unseen protector. For the first time that night, the momentum shifted. Far above, the sniper exhaled, eyes still locked on her scope. Her face betrayed no emotion. Each squeeze of the trigger was deliberate, each kill opening a path. She was not fighting for glory, nor recognition. She was there for one reason only: to make sure those men lived to see the far side of the bridge. The battle was far from over. But the tide, once an unstoppable wave threatening to drown the SEALs, had begun to turn. High on the ridge overlooking the bridge, the sniper lay pressed against the earth, her body camouflaged with a mix of dirt, leaves, and shadows. She had been in position for hours, motionless except for the steady rise and fall of her chest. Her name was Sergeant Elena Ramirez, though the SEALs below would never know it. Officially, she wasn't even part of the mission. She had been inserted quietly, tasked with silent overwatch, her presence known only to a handful of commanders. For her, this was not unusual. Snipers lived in the shadows, unseen and often uncredited. What mattered was results, not recognition. Through her scope, she had a perfect view of the battlefield. The bridge stretched beneath her like a stage, every movement illuminated by moonlight and muzzle flash. She had seen the ambush unfold in brutal clarity, the SEALs pinned, outnumbered, trapped. She had seen their commander, Harris, crouched low, barking orders with clenched determination. And she had seen the look in the soldier's eyes when despair crept in. That was the moment she had decided to intervene. Her world narrowed to crosshairs. The first man she dropped hadn't even screamed. One shot, center mass, the impact so sudden he collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. The second fell seconds later, a neat hole drilled through his forehead before he even knew he was targeted. Panic spread like wildfire through the attackers, and that was exactly what she needed. Still, Elena knew better than to rush. A sniper's greatest weapon wasn't just accuracy, it was patience. Every shot had to count. Ammunition wasn't infinite, and revealing her position was a risk. She had to remain unpredictable, striking fast and vanishing into silence. She adjusted her scope, finding the next target. A squad leader barking orders, his arm waving fighters forward. Her breathing slowed. Inhale. Exhale. Squeeze. The rifle bucked lightly against her shoulder. The man's head snapped back, lifeless before he hit the ground. His soldiers froze, direction lost. On the bridge, Harris noticed immediately. He shouted for his men to push, and though their movement was cautious, it was purposeful. The shift in morale was almost tangible. Elena could see it in the way the SEALs leaned out of cover, their bursts sharper, their shoulders less slumped. They had hope now, fragile but growing. Inside her earpiece, a faint voice crackled. It was the forward command center, monitoring from afar. "Ramirez, confirm status," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Engaged. Multiple targets down. SEAL team still pinned, but stabilizing. Continuing overwatch. Copy. Maintain concealment. Prioritize heavy weapons. Understood?" She refocused, shifting her rifle slightly. Her scope settled on a machine gun nest set up near the far end of the bridge. The gunner was spraying suppressive fire, keeping the SEALs from advancing. He had to go. But it wasn't easy. The nest was shielded by sandbags, with only brief glimpses of the gunner's head visible between bursts. She waited, calm as stone. Seconds dragged. Then, the gunner lifted higher, exposing more of his profile as he adjusted his stance. Elena squeezed. A crack echoed. The man collapsed, slumping over the weapon. A machine gun went silent. Through her scope, she saw one SEAL fist pump in triumph, shouting something drowned by battle noise. They surged forward, seizing the opportunity. A small smile tugged at Elena's lips, though it never reached her eyes. There was no time for celebration. Shifting again, she spotted movement below the bridge. 3 militants were attempting a flank, climbing onto the steel beams to come up beneath the SEAL's position. Clever, but not clever enough. She tracked the first one, waited until he steadied himself, then fired. He dropped instantly, falling into the water with a splash. His companions froze, eyes darting into the darkness, but they never saw her. 2 more cracks, and they too plunged into the river, motionless. Above, Harris was beginning to piece it together. He pressed a finger to his comb, voice strained but curious. "Unknown overwatch. If you can hear this, keep them coming." No reply came, but Elena heard him. She allowed herself one deep inhale, steadying the slight surge of adrenaline that threatened to break her calm. Her role wasn't to talk. Her role was to end threats before they ended the men below. The militants were growing frantic now. Without leadership and with casualties mounting, their cohesion was breaking. Some fired blindly into the night, others scrambled for cover, unsure where the death raining down was coming from. Elena thrived in that chaos. Confusion was her ally. She scanned for the next high-value target. A man with a radio, clearly coordinating. She didn't hesitate. One pull of the trigger, and his signal died with him. Down on the bridge, the SEALs began pushing harder. They moved in pairs, covering each other, their confidence restored. Harris kept them tight, disciplined, but he could feel the momentum shifting in their favor. Whoever was up there, guardian, angel, or ghost, they had turned certain death into a fighting chance. But the battle wasn't over. Far from it. Elena adjusted her scope again, and what she saw made her stomach tighten. From the opposite bank, headlights flared 2 pickup trucks barreling toward the bridge, fighters mounted in the beds with heavy weapons. If they reached the choke point, the SEALs would be cut down. She exhaled slowly, her calm unbroken. She had to stop them before they could deploy. Her first shot shattered a driver's windshield, the man slumping as the truck swerved violently. It crashed into the guardrail, metal screeching as sparks flew. Fighters tumbled out, disoriented, only to be picked off one by her relentless precision. The second truck pressed on, accelerating. She aimed carefully, the crosshairs hovering over the driver. Another squeeze. The truck veered wildly, flipping onto its side in a storm of sparks and smoke. The bridge shook from the impact, but the path remained clear. Elena allowed herself a moment to breathe. Her heart was steady, her pulse measured. She had done this countless times before, but every mission felt personal. These men on the bridge didn't know her name, her face, or her story, but they trusted her now, even unknowingly. And she would not fail them. From her hidden perch, Elena scanned the battlefield once more. The SEALs were advancing cautiously, but surely, their weapons barking in short, disciplined bursts. The enemy was faltering, leaderless, and broken. And still, she remained unseen, a shadow with a rifle, guiding them toward survival. The bridge stank of cordite and smoke, its steel frame echoing with every shot. Harris pressed his back against the concrete divider, chest heaving. Sweat streaked down his temple, mixing with dust and soot. For a moment, he couldn't believe what was happening. A minute ago, they'd been one volley away from annihilation. Now, militants were dropping as if lightning had chosen them one by one. "Who the hell is taking those shots?" muttered Petty Officer Delgado, peering over his rifle. "No idea," Harris said, his voice tight. "But whoever it is, keep firing with them." "Move on my mark." The squad exchanged wary glances. None of them wanted to admit how close they had been to collapse. Their training drilled discipline, but morale was a fragile thing. Now, with each enemy body hitting the steel, hope crept back in, quiet but undeniable. Another sharp crack rang out from somewhere beyond the battlefield. A militant who had been creeping toward their flank dropped instantly, blood pooling across the grating. The men ducked, then peeked again, eyes widening. Whoever this ghost was, they were watching everything. Harris clenched his jaw. "We're not alone. Someone's covering us. Use it." He rose halfway, fired 3 bursts toward an enemy cluster, and motioned his men forward. 2 SEALs sprinted across the exposed section, diving into cover as tracer rounds lit up around them. The unseen sniper struck again, dropping a machine gunner who had tried to sweep the bridge. "Jesus," whispered one of the men. "She's good." They didn't know it was a she, of course. But Harris did. A sliver of memory stirred the brief mention during mission prep of a shadow asset, unconfirmed but rumored. Overwatch, they had called it. A single word, spoken carefully, like it was classified even among warriors. He hadn't expected it to be true. Yet here they were, alive because of her. Another voice crackled in Harris's headset. "Lieutenant, this is Reaper 3. Bridge integrity compromised. Recommend expediting advance." Harris gritted his teeth. "We're doing what we can. We're pinned halfway, but something's changing here." He didn't elaborate. He wasn't sure how to explain the miracle unfolding. A militant with a shoulder-mounted RPG stepped forward from the far barricade, aiming down the bridge. Harris barely had time to shout a warning before the sniper fired again. The RPG clattered harmlessly to the steel, its wielder collapsing. The explosive went off prematurely, blasting shrapnel harmlessly into the river below. The SEALs roared with sudden adrenaline, voices filled with renewed fight. "Push now," Harris ordered. They moved in pairs, leapfrogging from cover to cover, their formation tight. Each advance was dangerous, but each time the sniper struck at the perfect moment, clearing obstacles no ordinary team could have handled alone. Delgado fired controlled bursts, teeth bared in determination. 'She's saving our asses out here. Then let's make it count,' Harris shouted back. The militants were faltering. Their earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced with confusion and fear. They shouted at one another in frantic tones, pointing toward the ridgelines, trying to spot the invisible predator cutting them down. Some fired blindly into the darkness, but their bullets found nothing. The SEALs seized the moment. Harris vaulted over a barrier, sprinting toward a burned-out truck that provided new cover. His men followed, suppressing fire crackling at his side. For the first time since the ambush began, they weren't just surviving, they were advancing. But the fight was far from won. A fresh wave of hostiles poured onto the bridge from the far bank, rifles raised, determined to plug the gap left by their fallen leader. They moved fast, shouting in harsh commands. Harris cursed. The enemy still had numbers on their side, and exhaustion weighed heavy on his men. Another shot rang out. One of the newcomers dropped. Then another. The sniper was relentless, her cadence steady, her rhythm like a drumbeat that carried the SEALs forward. Yet Harris knew this couldn't last forever. Sooner or later, she'd run out of ammunition, or worse, they'd triangulate her position. They had to break through before that happened. "Move! Move!" he shouted, waving his men down the final stretch. They sprinted, bullets sparking off the steel beneath their boots. Harris felt the sting of a near miss graze his sleeve. Ahead, the enemy regrouped, setting up another barricade. The air buzzed with danger, every breath tasting of smoke and blood. The sniper adjusted again, her shots deliberate. One fighter carrying extra ammunition fell, cutting supply. Another, who was reaching for a grenade, crumpled before he could pull the pin. Every kill mattered, every second bought with precision. The SEALs hit the next cover hard, breath ragged, weapons nearly empty. They reloaded with practiced speed, their hands steady despite fatigue. Harris scanned his men. They were alive. Barely, but alive. And every one of them was looking at him now, waiting for the next order. For a brief heartbeat, Harris allowed himself to glance up toward the ridgeline bathed in moonlight. He couldn't see her, not even a glint. But he knew she was there. A shadow in the distance, watching through her scope, carrying their lives in her crosshairs. He tapped his com. "Whoever you are out there, keep it coming. We'll do the rest." There was no reply. Just another sharp crack as a hostile fell, opening the path forward again. The SEALs didn't need words. They had faith, now not blind faith, but earned trust. The kind forged when death was inches away and someone pulled you back from the edge. As they prepared to surge again, Harris felt something he hadn't dared feel since the ambush began. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't recklessness. It was belief. The bridge was still long, the night still merciless, and the mission still uncertain. But they weren't alone. Somewhere out there, unseen and untouchable, a deadly guardian was rewriting the story. And Harris swore to himself they would not waste the chance she was giving them. The SEALs had clawed their way farther down the bridge, moving in disciplined bursts, momentum building with each step. For the first time since the ambush began, Harris allowed himself a sliver of hope. They were bruised, exhausted, and nearly dry on ammunition, but the rhythm of combat was shifting. Each time they surged, the mysterious sniper above struck at exactly the right moment, carving gaps in the enemy's line. It was as though she could read the battle like a map. But wars aren't won on luck, and the militants were far from beaten. The moment Harris motioned his men forward again, the night erupted with a new sound-a-bone-deep roar that shook the bridge like thunder. A heavy machine gun opened fire from the far end, its muzzle spewing fire, its rounds hammering the steel with terrifying force. The SEALs dove instinctively for cover, sparks exploding around them as the gun chewed through concrete and twisted metal. One man cried out, clutching his leg as fragments tore into his thigh. Blood spread quickly across the grating. "Medic!" Harris barked. Petty Officer Collins dragged the wounded man back, working quickly to tie a tourniquet. The others fired sporadically, but none of their rifles could compete with the withering stream of bullets. The air filled with deafening clangs as rounds struck the girders, echoing down into the river below. Pinned again. Harris slammed a fist against the barrier in frustration. The sniper had been their salvation, but even she couldn't neutralize a fortified heavy weapon with just luck. That gun would rip them apart before they ever reached the far side. "Lieutenant, we're stuck!" Delgado shouted, his voice nearly drowned out by the roar. Harris leaned out for a split second, ducking back as a burst ripped the corner where his head had been. He cursed under his breath, mind racing. Options narrowed like a noose. Above on the ridge, Alana Ramirez steadied her breathing. Through her scope, the world became a tunnel, just her rifle, and the glowing fury of the machine gun nest. The gunner was dug in behind sandbags, his field of fire dominating the bridge. Every time he adjusted the weapon, the seals were forced lower, trapped like insects beneath a hammer. Elena knew she had to end it. The distance wasn't the problem. She had made longer shots in worse conditions. The angle, the cover, the chaos around him, that was the challenge. Only fragments of his profile appeared between bursts. She would have milliseconds to act. One mistake, and the bridge would drown in blood. She inhaled, then let the air slip slowly from her lungs. Her finger rested on the trigger, light as a feather. The machine gun roared again, muzzle rising just enough. Crack! The gunner's head snapped back violently. He slumped forward, collapsing onto the weapon. For a heartbeat, the machine gun sputtered, its thunder dying mid-burst. On the bridge, the SEALs lifted their heads, eyes wide. The impossible had just happened. "Go! Move now!" Harris bellowed, seizing the moment. They surged from cover, firing controlled bursts as they advanced. Two militants rushed forward to grab the abandoned gun, but before their hands touched the grips, Elena fired again. One fell, then the other. The weapon lay silent, useless, its dominance erased. Cheers erupted from the SEALs, raw relief cutting through the smoke. Delgado slapped his rifle against the barrier with a grin. She nailed him. She actually nailed him. But Harris didn't smile. He couldn't, not yet. He knew battles were never decided by a single victory. Still, he couldn't deny the surge of energy in his men. They moved like different soldiers now alive, fierce and determined. The sniper's intervention had reminded them that they weren't powerless. That mattered more than bullets. The militants, on the other hand, were unraveling. The machine gun had been their anchor, their hammer. Without it, their control of the battlefield slipped. Harris could see the panic rippling through their line. They shouted conflicting orders, their cohesion fraying with every second. Elena continued her watch, scope tracking the chaos. She saw a fighter reach for a rocket tube, aiming for the SEAL's new cover. Crack. He dropped before he could fire. She shifted instantly, taking another who tried to drag the heavy weapon away. Precision, patience, inevitability, her rhythm was unbroken. The bridge was still a gauntlet, but now, step by step, it was being reclaimed. Harris led from the front, pushing his men forward in pairs. They ducked, covered, advanced, fired. Training took over, their bodies moving even as exhaustion burned in their muscles. The wounded man had been stabilized, carried by two comrades who refused to leave him behind. As they neared the wreckage of the truck that had crashed earlier, Harris paused. He pressed a finger to his cum. To whoever's out there, thank you. No reply came. Just another clean shot, another enemy silenced. The SEALs grinned through their exhaustion. It didn't matter if she answered. They knew she was listening, watching, guiding. For Elena, the words meant little. Gratitude was never why she did this. But as she lay hidden in the dirt, rifle pressed to her shoulder, she felt something stir. She wasn't just ending threats tonight. She was rewriting fate. The bridge, once a death trap, was becoming a passage. And she was the one carving it open. Still, she knew the fight was far from over. In the distance, her scope picked up fresh movement. Shadows gathering. Reinforcements coming. The enemy wasn't done. And neither was she. The battle had only begun to tip, but tonight, Elena Ramirez intended to see it through. The gun nest was gone, the thunder silenced, but victory on a battlefield never held still. Even as the SEALs pushed forward, a ripple of unrest surged through the enemy lines. Fighters scattered at first, retreating into the shadows beyond the wreckage. But the retreat was not disarray. It was preparation. Harris saw the signs in an instant. The pause wasn't surrender. It was the inhale before another strike. Eyes up. He barked, raising his fist to halt the team. They're not done yet. The men crouched low, scanning the smoke-shrouded bridge. The river below churned black, reflecting bursts of flame from scattered fires. The night smelled of burned fuel and cordite. It was a place of ghosts and steel, where sound traveled strangely and every shadow seemed alive. Then came the cries, foreign words shouted in unison, echoing off the girders. Harris's stomach tightened. Reinforcements. Dozens of voices. Figures poured from both ends of the bridge, fanning into cover with practiced aggression. Harris counted at least 30, maybe more. His men were down to their last magazines, some already running on partials. The wounded SEAL groaned softly as Collins adjusted the tourniquet again, his face pale. "Lieutenant," Delgado muttered, "we can't outlast this." Harris didn't answer immediately. He knew Delgado was right. They had fought hard, but the numbers were shifting back. A storm was forming, and they were standing in its eye. Then the first shot cracked from above. A militant at the front crumpled before his squad could even raise their rifles. Another fell half a second later, mid-shout, his voice cut off in a spray of dust. The enemy faltered, momentum breaking. "She's still with us," Harris said under his breath. The SEALs opened fire, the sudden shock creating an opening. They hit the nearest cluster of militants, driving them behind a burned-out sedan. Bullets tore through metal, glass shattering into sparks. Harris's rifle clicked dry. He slammed a fresh mag in, the motion automatic, his breath ragged. But the militants regrouped quickly. A pair of them tried to flank from the right, moving low behind twisted beams. Elena tracked them through her scope. She didn't hesitate one shot, then the other, both collapsing before they could advance. She shifted again, following the flicker of a muzzle, flash deeper in the smoke. Another round dropped its source. Her rhythm was unbroken, but her mind was sharp with calculation. Ammunition was finite. Every shot had to matter. She picked leaders, men giving hand signals, fighters carrying heavier weapons. One by one, she severed the head from the body of the assault. On the bridge, Harris saw the effect. The enemy's surge wavered, as though invisible wires were being cut. Each time they tried to rally, another key fighter went down. "Whoever she is," Delgado muttered while firing a burst, "she's not just covering us. She's running the fight." The SEALs moved in tight coordination now, confidence slowly returning. They knew when to duck, when to push, when to sprint, all guided by the thunderclap rhythm of the unseen rifle. Harris didn't need radio contact with her. The timing was perfect. It was as if she could feel the fight in her bones, the same way they did. Still, the enemy pressed on. Mortar of desperation, fueled by anger, not strategy. They fired wildly, forcing the SEALs down, bullets sparking off steel and stone. A grenade clinked near Harris's position. He grabbed Delgado and hurled him aside as the blast rocked the bridge, shrapnel tearing past his shoulder. He rolled back up, ears ringing, rifle raised. The militants surged again, 10 at once, screaming as they charged. Harris braced himself. There wasn't enough ammo left. But Elan was already there. Her scope followed the lead man, his chest illuminated faintly by the burning wreck. Crack. He dropped. She adjusted instantly, barely exhaling as she sent another into the dirt. The charge faltered, slowed, broke apart. The SEALs seized the pause, unleashing everything they had left. The bridge became a graveyard of momentum. For minutes that stretched like hours, the fight held in that brutal rhythm, enemy pushes shattered by precise gunfire, SEALs grinding forward step by step. Every man on that bridge knew they should already be dead. The difference between survival and annihilation was one woman lying hidden in the dark, unseen and unheard, her fingers steady, her will unbreakable. At last, the enemy pullback was clear. Shouts rang out, frantic, not commanding. Fighters began to fall away from their positions, dragging wounded, abandoning weapons. The bridge trembled less with fire now and more with the silence of retreat. The SEALs slumped against cover, chest heaving. Delgado spat over the side, shaking his head. We shouldn't be standing. Collins checked the wounded man again. The bleeding was slowed, but he was weak. They had to move soon. Harris looked back toward the far ridge, his eyes narrowing. He still hadn't seen her. Not once. Just the flash of her impact on their lives. She's out there, he murmured. And she's not letting us fall. Above, Elena remained motionless, cheek pressed to the stock. Her body ached from hours in the dirt, muscles stiff, but her pulse was steady. She watched the militants scatter like leaves in wind. But she didn't relax. She knew what the SEALs didn't. That enemy retreat wasn't the end. It was transition. Somewhere in the dark, new plans were being formed. Heavier reinforcements might be gathering already. The fight was far from done. Still, as she watched Harris rally his men, dragging the wounded toward better cover, a rare flicker of pride touched her chest. These weren't faceless soldiers. They fought with heart, with discipline, with the refusal to quit. And tonight, they weren't fighting alone. The silence after the last wave felt almost wrong. The bridge, scarred by fire and riddled with shell holes, groaned under its own weight. Shattered glass crunched beneath the SEALs' boots as they shifted position, dragging the wounded deeper behind the twisted husk of a cargo truck. Harris leaned against the metal, chest heaving, every nerve raw. For the first time in hours, he let himself believe the worst had passed. Then he heard it. A low rumble. Deep, mechanical. Growing louder. Engines. Contact. Vehicles inbound. Delgado shouted, eyes widening as headlights pierced the smoke. From the far end of the bridge, 2 trucks emerged, bristling with armed men. One mounted a heavy DSHK on its roof, its barrel gleaming like the scythe of death. The SEALs ducked instinctively as the gun opened up, spraying the bridge in blinding arcs. Sparks exploded from girders. Steel shrieked as rounds punched through barriers like paper. The air turned to molten lead. Pinned again. Down. Stay down. Harris roared, dragging a man by his vest as bullets tore through their cover. The wounded sailor whimpered, shielding his face. The trucks rolled closer, their engines snarling, militants pouring fire from every angle. Behind them, more shadows appeared, fighters carrying crates, setting charges. Harris's blood ran cold. They weren't just pushing through. They were going to bring the bridge down entirely. "Sir," Collins shouted over the roar, If they set those, this whole span is gone. We won't survive a collapse. Harris's mind raced. The team had nothing left to counter vehicles. No rockets, no explosives. Their rifles might scratch paint, but wouldn't stop steel. They were boxed in, minutes from annihilation. And then, the first crack split the air. The sniper. Elena's scope locked onto the driver of the lead truck. Through the chaos, she tracked the faint silhouette behind the windshield. The shot had to thread through glass, smoke, and motion, but she had no choice. She squeezed the trigger. The driver's head snapped sideways. The truck lurched, swerving hard. Tires screamed against metal grating. It smashed into the rail, sparks showering the river below, militants screaming as they scrambled for balance. The gunner on the roof cursed and swung the DSHK wildly, searching for her unseen perch. He fired a thunderous burst into the night sky, but Elena was already gone. Rolling to a new position, scope realigning. Crack! The gunner slumped against the mounted weapon, body hanging like a ragdoll. The machine gun fell silent. On the bridge, Harris saw the window open. Push, now. Take the flank. The SEALs rose as one, unleashing controlled bursts. And militants reeled, suddenly leaderless. But the second truck surged forward, headlights blazing, fighters shouting from its bed. One leaped down with a satchel charge, sprinting toward the bridge's support beam. "Ramirez, stop him," Harris whispered under his breath, though no comb linked them. As if she heard, Elena's crosshairs found the runner. Crack! The satchel fell, detonating prematurely in a plume of fire, tossing the man's body across the asphalt. The bridge shook, dust raining from the girders, but it held. More militants swarmed behind the truck, pouring fire. The SEALs ducked low, magazines running dangerously thin. Delgado cursed, fumbling his last mag into his rifle. "I'm down after this." Elena shifted again, picking off anyone who moved with purpose. A man lifting a rocket tube down. Another trying to ignite a fuse down. Each round bought the SEALs precious seconds, but the tide wasn't breaking. The enemy just kept coming. Then the second truck accelerated, barreling straight toward the SEALs' position. "Brace!" Harris shouted, pulling his men back. The wounded screamed as they were dragged behind cover. The truck closed in, engine roaring, grill like a steel maw hungry for blood. Elena steadied her scope, heart pounding. A moving target at that speed was nearly impossible. She exhaled, tracked the driver, waited for the briefest alignment, and fired. The windshield spider-webbed. The driver slumped, but the truck didn't stop. Momentum carried it forward, faster, closer. "Get clear," Harris yelled. The SEALs dove aside as the vehicle smashed into the cargo truck, metal screaming on metal. The explosion of impact shook the bridge, flames erupting from ruptured fuel. Fighters inside the bed were thrown like dolls, some landing broken, others scrambling dazed. But one climbed free, satchel in hand, running toward the support beam again. Elena shifted, but this time, smoke blinded her view. She moved quickly, dragging her rifle across the ridge for a new angle. Every second cost. Harris saw the man closing in, horror rising in his chest. Then the crack split the smoke. The militant crumpled mid-stride, the charge falling harmlessly into the fire. The SEALs exhaled in unison, adrenaline surging like electricity. "Unbelievable," Delgado muttered. "She's saving us shot for shot." But Harris wasn't celebrating. He knew this wasn't over. The trucks were wrecked, the enemy scattered, but they would return. They always returned. And when they did, the SEALs would have even less to fight with. Still, for now, they were alive. Alive because of her. Above, Elena reloaded her last magazine, fingers steady despite the ache in her arms. She checked the bridge again, scanning for new threats. None yet, but she knew reinforcements were massing beyond the smoke, readying for another push. She whispered softly to herself, words no one else would ever hear. Not tonight. Not while I'm breathing. The bridge had become more than steel and stone now. It was a battlefield of wills, and Elena Ramirez was not about to lose. The bridge quaked under the weight of fire. Sparks leapt from twisted steel, smoke thickened, and the air vibrated with the constant rattle of gunfire. The SEALs had advanced farther than anyone had dared to hope, but the militants were not finished. They had regrouped stronger, smarter, and fueled by desperation. Harris crouched low, heart hammering, eyes scanning every shadow. He counted at least 20 fighters, converging from multiple angles. They had blocked both ends of the bridge and were advancing with grenades, satchel charges, and rocket-propelled grenades. This was no random attack. It was a calculated strike meant to annihilate the SEALs and reclaim the bridge entirely. "Brace yourselves," Harris shouted, slamming his back against a barrier. "Hold the line, whatever it takes." The first grenades landed nearby, showering sparks and shrapnel. One exploded too close for comfort, and a SEAL was thrown sideways, helmet spinning off his head. Harris dove, dragging him behind cover. Blood and dust coated the grating. Delgado's rifle barked, bullets tearing into militants who dared to advance. Yet every step forward felt like wading through fire. Every second brought new threats, more chaos. Then came the unmistakable sound of coordination. The enemy had leaders now, shouting orders, moving units like pieces on a chessboard. Harris realized they were in a trap. They could advance a few meters, but the bridge's twisted steel created kill zones, and the militants knew them all. Above the fray, Alana Ramirez lay prone in the shadows, her rifle steady despite hours of motionless tension. Through her scope, the bridge below became a living diagram of danger. Every position, every movement, every angle, she mapped it all. A militant squad attempted to flank the SEALs from a destroyed truck. Elena tracked their motion. One quick adjustment, a breath held, and the lead man's chest erupted into red. Another fell seconds later. Chaos struck the enemy before they reached firing positions. The SEALs surged with renewed purpose. Harris barked orders, coordinating bursts, moving wounded, keeping morale alive. They were exhausted, low on ammo, but the sniper's precision gave them seconds, inches, opportunities that otherwise would not exist. Yet the militants persisted. They hurled satchel charges onto the bridge, forcing SEALs to scramble, only to have Elena's shots intercept one before it could detonate near Harris. Sparks showered the concrete as it fell harmlessly into the river. "Whoever's up there," whispered Collins, his hands shaking as he reloaded. She's insane. How is she doing this?" Harris didn't answer. He knew. He could feel it in every precise shot, every split-second intervention. It wasn't luck. It was mastery. And she was saving them, every single time. The assault intensified. The far end of the bridge erupted with muzzle flashes, the roar of automatic rifles, and the clanging of heavy weaponry. Explosions rocked the metal, forcing the SEALs back into cover repeatedly. Every time a militant pushed forward, Elena's rifle found the weak link, the gunner, the grenadier, the squad leader cutting their advance in a heartbeat. A new threat appeared, a militant armed with a rocket launcher climbing over the wreckage. Harris caught sight and dove, signaling Delgado to cover. The man fired, and the rocket hissed past, missing by mere inches. Elena had tracked him through the smoke. Her finger found the trigger. Crack. He dropped before he could reload. The rocket clattered harmlessly onto the bridge. Harris risked a glance upward. He still couldn't see her. She was a ghost, a shadow, a force that defied belief. Yet each action she took gave his men the chance to survive and fight back. The militants tried another strategy. One group pressed from below the bridge's girders, moving through the shadows along the supports. Harris groaned. If they reached the understructure, the SEALs would be trapped completely. "Sniper now," he whispered, though he knew it was redundant. Elena had already calculated the trajectory. Crack. The first enemy slid back into the dark water. Another crack followed. The third froze, then fell. On the bridge, Harris allowed himself a brief, silent prayer. The SEALs advanced carefully, covering one another, now synchronized with the sniper's interventions. The bridge, once a death trap, was slowly becoming a corridor to survival. But even survival had a price. Rounds were low. 2 men had been wounded by shrapnel. Exhaustion dragged at every limb. Yet Harris saw the determination in their eyes. They weren't just surviving. They were fighting back. Every glance at the sky was a silent acknowledgement of their unseen ally. Then the enemy made their boldest move yet. A squad of fighters climbed the twisted wreckage, attempting to charge directly at the SEALs' position with knives, grenades, and sheer aggression. Harris's chest tightened. There were too many to handle conventionally. Elena adjusted her scope. One by one, she targeted the most immediate threats the closest, the fastest, the deadliest. Crack, crack, crack. Each shot echoed over the bridge like a drumbeat of inevitability. The attackers faltered, then hesitated, then retreated, their confidence shattered. The SEALs surged forward, weapons firing, hearts pounding, adrenaline screaming through every vein. Harris looked at Delgado, both men gasping in disbelief. We're still alive. We're actually alive." Delgado wiped soot from his face. "And she's still out there. Every step of the way." The bridge, battered and scarred, stretched ahead. Smoke curled into the sky, fire licked at metal, and the night seemed to hold its breath. The SEALs had survived, but only because of her unseen, relentless precision. Elena repositioned yet again, scanning, waiting. Her mission wasn't done. Reinforcements might come. Another wave could strike. The fight was far from over. But for now, she allowed herself a heartbeat of satisfaction. The SEALs had hope. They were alive. And in war, that was everything. The bridge groaned under the weight of destruction. Smoke curled in thick, acrid plumes, and jagged steel glinted like broken teeth under the moonlight. Every step carried risk. Every breath tasted of cordite and fear. Yet the SEALs, battered and bloodied, pressed forward with a relentless determination. They had survived impossible odds so far. Harris raised his hand, signaling his team to halt. Eyes scanned the distance. Across the span, the far side of the bridge shimmered with moonlight, the edge of their objective, the threshold between death and survival. The enemy was scattered, but not yet gone. They would not surrender willingly. Every instinct screamed caution. "Final push," Harris muttered. "We make it across, or none of us do." The SEALs nodded, grim and silent, trusting his lead. Bullets continued to ricochet from shattered girders, a harsh reminder that the night was far from over. But in the shadows above, Elena Ramirez lay prone, her rifle pressed firmly to her shoulder, eyes locked on the advancing militants. She had tracked every movement for hours, but now the stakes had never been higher. One miscalculation could mean death for the entire team or worse, a bridge lost and mission failed. The enemy had regrouped near the far support beam. Roughly a dozen fighters crouched behind debris, clutching weapons and shouting orders. They had clearly recognized the SEALs' momentum, but were unwilling to yield. Harris felt a tight knot of fear in his stomach. This was the final gauntlet, and every second counted. "Move," he whispered sharply. They leapt from cover in pairs, sprinting, ducking, weaving, firing controlled bursts at the enemy. The militants responded, spraying fire in short, frantic bursts. One SEAL went down briefly, narrowly avoiding a hit that cracked the steel beside him. Harris pressed forward, dragging the wounded and covering each man's advance with suppressive fire. Above, Elena's crosshairs danced across the field of battle. She selected targets with precision, prioritizing those who could threaten the SEAL's final run. The first militant to raise a rocket launcher for the last charge fell instantly, his weapon clattering harmlessly to the grating. Another attempted to hurl a grenade into the SEAL's path crack. The projectile fell short, harmlessly tumbling into the river below. Harris didn't dare look up, but he knew she was there. Each shot she fired opened a path, gave him breathing room, gave his men a chance at life. The team surged, step by step, inch by inch. The enemy pressed back, desperate now, realizing they were being methodically stripped of their advantage. One man ran forward with a rifle, attempting to intercept the SEAL's lead position. Elena's rifle barked twice, and he crumpled into the shadows. Panic began to ripple through the remaining fighters. They were leaderless, outmaneuvered, and under fire from an invisible enemy whose every shot was deliberate, merciless, and flawless. Harris reached the midpoint of the bridge. Sweat mixed with blood, and his muscles screamed from hours of tension and exertion. The SEALs behind him faltered briefly, but found courage in each other and in the unseen sniper above. "Cover us," Harris shouted. "We run together." They surged forward, sprinting across exposed steel as bullets tore the air around them. Sparks flew with each near miss, the roar of the river below mixing with explosions from scattered debris. Harris felt a searing pain in his shoulder, but ignored it. The objective was clear: cross the bridge. Survival demanded everything they had left. Elena tracked the final threats with relentless focus. A militant with a heavy weapon stepped into the open, aiming directly for Harris. She inhaled, exhaled, and fired. The man fell before the gun could roar, the last major obstacle removed. Harris glimpsed the clearing at the far end of the bridge. The first steps onto solid ground felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. Relief surged, but he kept moving, covering his men. One by one, they reached safety, dragging the wounded behind them. Almost there. He called, voice hoarse, adrenaline still thrumming. From her perch, Elena allowed herself a moment's satisfaction. The bridge, once a death trap, had become a corridor to survival. Her role was complete, at least for now. She had struck every enemy who threatened them, taken the shots no one else could, and guided the SEALs inch by inch toward freedom. The militants, disoriented and leaderless, retreated into the shadows. The roar of the river below masked the groans of their fallen, and the bridge was theirs. For the first time that night, silence reigned, broken only by the labored breathing of the survivors. Harris scanned the bridge behind him, taking stock of his team. They were battered, some bleeding, all exhausted, but alive. Each man's eyes held a mixture of awe and gratitude, though none knew the identity of the guardian who had carried them through. "Check your mags. Check your men. Move," he barked, shaking off exhaustion. "We're not celebrating until we're out of this zone." Collins helped the wounded to their feet. Delgado slumped against a barrier, brushing soot from his face. "Sir, she's unreal," he said softly, voice shaking. Harris nodded, silent acknowledgement. She wasn't just good. She was extraordinary. And though they didn't see her, they knew she had saved them all. High above, Elena gathered her rifle and slipped into the darkness, leaving no trace. Her mission was done. No one would know her name. No one would claim her glory. But the SEALs would live to fight another day because of her. That, she considered, was enough. Harris looked back once at the bridge, now scarred and smoking, and allowed himself a rare private breath of relief. The impossible had been achieved. Lives had been saved against overwhelming odds. And somewhere above, unseen but indelibly present, their salvation had lingered like a shadow. The SEALs moved forward, carrying their wounded, eyes wary, hearts still hammering. They had crossed the bridge, survived the ambush, and lived to fight another day. And though they didn't know it yet, one guardian hidden, deadly, and unseen had etched her mark into their lives forever. The bridge, once a symbol of death, now represented hope, courage, and survival. And as Elena vanished into the night, her rifle slung across her back, one truth remained undeniable. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones you never see. The mission was over. The SEALs were alive. And the shadow above the bridge, Elena Ramirez, had written the final, invisible line in a story no one would forget.